of the things Glenn's asked me to talk about tonight is the whole area of fear and how do you deal with fear. So I want to ask you a question as I start tonight. What scares you? You know, you might have a particular thing that scares you, or you might have particular things that go on in your life that you're really quite frightened of. Or maybe there's things that you haven't ever told anybody about. You know, discovering how to overcome our fears can be such a challenge for most people. But can I say today, it's actually possible to overcome fear. You know, fears mostly are learned behavior. You know, if you've got a cat and it jumps on a hot stove, it will never, ever jump on a stove again, whether it's cold or hot, because that cat learned a lesson that a stove is a bad thing. And if I get up there, I'm going to burn my feet. And the reality is many of our fears go back to an experience, something that we had, something we did, or something that happened to us maybe when we're very young. You know, no one's really born with fear, but we can unlearn our fears by practicing facing, dealing with fear and resisting it till it goes away. You know, one of the things that it's important to understand with fear is that it can be a good thing. You know, it stops us doing stupid stuff like, you know, if fear of running in traffic or fear of jumping off buildings, or, you know, like those things are actually kind of cool. You need to have those kind of fears, but there's also other fears that actually control us and stop us. And the most common fear that we experience, which often sabotage us, are like a fear of failure or fear of poverty or even a loss of money. They're things that are really big in people's hearts, you know. And these fears can actually cause people to avoid risk. And if you're a person that avoids risk, you take a lot of energy to step around things. And it's possible there's fears that are embedded in your heart that you need to learn to walk around, need to learn to overcome. And what tends to happen is we end up rejecting opportunity that comes along because of the fears associated with it. Or it may make you react in different ways. For instance, you know, if you've ever seen a hoarder, someone who hoards in their house, and they keep all this stuff, if you dig into their past, you'll often find that thing is driven by a deep-seated fear often in people's hearts, a fear of lack. You know, I had a friend once, actually I still know this guy, but I remember many years ago, because I'm a minister, I do funerals and things like that. It's one of the things I did. And I did this guy's funeral, and his mother died, and he was telling me at the funeral how his father had got him in poverty when he was young, and he'd sort of made like this thing over his life, like a curse, I'd call it. And it was, I'm never going to be poor. But this guy has spent his life accumulating stuff. And I went to visit him some time ago, and he's built this enormous shed in his backyard, and it's full of stuff. It's just stuff, you know, like he's now in his 70s and he's got all this stuff because it makes him feel safe. But that's the root. The root of it is a fear. You know, some of you might be afraid of failure. You know, and the things that come along and paralyze you, come a place of taking any chance at all in life. And there's other people that might have a fear of loss of love or a fear of embarrassment. Who's ever had that? You know, you get embarrassed really easily. Or fear of rejection is a really big fear that people deal with, or fear of loss of respect or esteem. And these are other things that hold us back in our life. And one of the things that fear does is it paralyzes you. The most common reaction to a fear is this declaration of, I can't do that. I'm unable to do that. And this is the fear of failure that stops us from kind of stepping in and taking action. It's almost experienced physically. It starts in the pit of your stomach, and when you start to be afraid, then your heart starts to beat faster and your breathing goes quicker, and you might feel a pit in your stomach and you start to feel dizzy, you're sweating, or you might get a dry mouth. Your muscles might start to get tense or weak. And this is the result of your body sending these extra adrenaline around your system and blood to your muscles and brain. It's preparing you to either run away or to fight. That's the natural reaction, which generally is not either of those is not really a good option. And it ends up can shut your brain down. Has ever been in a time where something happened and you just got gripped by fear? It's like an animal caught in a headlight. You just don't know what to do. You're just suddenly struck with fear, and that can paralyze you, and it can shut down the brain and causes you to either that thing of flight or fright. Another thing that's a big issue today is the whole area of anxiety. And I don't know if any of you struggle with anxiety, but it's a really big disorder today. In fact, I think statistically it's around about 20% of people have anxiety disorders. And it's anxiety is like long-term fear. It's typically focused on the future rather than the present, and anxiety disorders are on the increase. And, COVID obviously has opened the way for that. We're living in a time with, it's like fear's been given a powerful place in our community today. But if you have difficulty maybe falling asleep at night, or you can't concentrate, or you replay the same scenario over in your brain over and over. Anyone done that? And these are signs of anxiety. That's what anxiety can do. And it can manifest more acute in ways of like panic attacks. And you may have had a panic attack sometime, and they come on suddenly and cause shortness of breath, and you sweat or you get chills and your heart starts to pound, and an overall sense of dread. Sometimes a panic attack can actually feel almost like a heart attack, and it can just overwhelm you. Another thing that can happen is phobias, another common type of fear. And many adults have a phobia at some point. It can be a fear of a specific situation or an object or an animal. My daughters absolutely fear spiders. I don't know whether you guys like spiders, but we used to live in the country and lots of spiders. And I remember one day a spider crawled on the window of our car, and my daughter, she just like flipped out, like completely flipped out. And I know spiders could be scary, but it was like beyond the pale, Or you might have a fear of public speaking or enclosed spaces or flying. I mean, that's another big fear. I used to have this real fear of angry people. And excuse me, my phone's ringing. I'm just going to turn it off. I apologize for that. And it's funny because the sort of work I've done over the years is work with people who are angry, and the way I've dealt with that fear of anger is literally put myself in situations where I've had to face it, and when you deal with angry people, I've been in rooms where people have punched walls and today, obviously I'm a big kind of a guy, but today, anger doesn't faze me because it's something I've faced. I used to have a fear of public speaking, believe it or not. And that's what I kind of do for a living today, But I remember I'd be in a church, and that church Glenn talked about. I'd be sitting there and I was getting ready to go up and say something. I'd be so nervous. I'd be all worried, and I'd read my notes and I'd think, oh, God, but it was really deep down in me, it was a fear of getting it wrong, a fear of rejection. And, as I've faced those things in my heart, I've overcome them. And, anybody ever got embarrassed and you go bright red and it just overwhelms you? And that's another thing that can happen. But, fear is like smoke. If you walk towards it, it just separates. It just goes away. And you keep walking towards the fear, and you suddenly realize you're on the other side of it. And see, fear isn't real. It's something that's embedded in your spirit. And overcoming fear lets you harness the fear response and use it to your advantage. And I just want to give you a few tools, if that's okay, today to overcome fear. Another thing before I get there, has anybody ever met anybody that's a bit of a control freak? They manage people, or they manage things, and they're just completely in control all the time. Well, control freaks are actually driven by fear. And so they think that if I control everything, it'll be safe. But the reality is, all that is doing is masking your fear by trying to control everything. And if you're thinking about that while I'm talking right now, if you think, hey, hang on, that's me, can I say to you right now, this is a losing battle. You will never, ever have enough control over things to feel safe. You know, in your attempt to control fear, you actually become a victim of it. And this fear and control cycle leaves a lot of people feeling defeated, you know. And the reality is you'll always be things that are far beyond our ability to control. We've actually got to come to a place of being chill about whatever goes on. You're rolling with the punches. So getting back to what I started to say, how do I overcome fear? Now, learning to conquer fear begins as you connect with your inner man, your inner spirit. Each one of you in this room today, there's the person that's you deep inside, not the person that everyone else sees, but the person that you know you are deep inside. That's your inner man. And learning how to overcome fear is much like any problem. You solve problems and you must identify the challenge in order to overcome it. What is it you're afraid of? So a way to do that is sit quietly for a few moments and observe your thoughts, your feelings, your body's senses, and no music, no other sounds, just you, and sit still with that for a minute and just start to think and ask yourself, what is it I'm really afraid of? And what comes along, start to write that down and be as specific as you can. Listen to your heart, not your emotions. And as you do that, you'll actually start to realize that the thing becomes irrational. It's not based in a truth. As you connect with your inner spirit, you'll feel empowered to confront your fears. And, you know, like I remember a friend of mine told me he had a fear of drowning. And when he was a young boy, he actually got caught underwater, and it developed in him a real fear of water. And every time he got even in a bath, it used to scare him, you know, like it frightened him. So this day he filled the bath full of water and he got in the bath and he just hated it. But he forced himself into that bath until he overcame it. And he got out of that bath and that thing no longer had power over his spirit, you know. So recognizing the fear can help working to your advantage. And our emotions exist to tell us stuff, you know. Why, when you feel fear, your soul's trying to tell you something. So listen to your soul. If you feel overcome by stress or anxiety, it's likely a subconscious fear that needs your attention. Rather than avoiding it, overcoming fear requires leaning in to your anxiety, not running away. So everything in you says, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to face that. But as you lean into it, you'll realize I actually have power over it. View the fear as a piece of information instead of a threat to your survival. When you use anxiety to your advantage, it can't ruin your life. In overcoming fear, it becomes your ally, a critical source of guidance to reach your full potential. Now, it might sound crazy what I'm saying, but can I say to you today, as you learn to lean in to the thing that you're struggling to overcome, you'll find that it's like that smoke I talked about. It no longer has the power over you because it's an intimidation. Another thing to do is sit with your fear. Our fears can lead to behaviors that do more harm than good, like drinking, you know. My father was an alcoholic, you know. And the reason he was an alcoholic is he ran a huge business and it got too much for him. And he found that he couldn't deal with all the people in business unless he had a few drinks in him, you know. But the few drinks became a few more drinks, and eventually it destroyed his marriage. My parents divorced when I was very young. And, you know, eventually he died very young of alcohol, but he was an intelligent man. But unfortunately, the fears that he had in his heart, instead of overcoming them, he allowed the alcohol to become the tool to deal. And can I say to you, it never fixes anything. Alcohol just removes stuff, you know. Drugs just removes things from you, you know. Another thing we can do is reaching for comfort food. When you're really depressed or you're really overwhelmed, we can eat too much, and I know we're all probably, during COVID, we're all eating too much, aren't we? Well, I don't know about you. I'm certainly eating too much, but maybe it's just me. But another thing we can tend to do is we repress, we push down the anxiety, and this can lead to anger or lashing out. We lash out, particularly on those people we love, like our mum or our dad or, our brothers and sisters. So next time you feel fearful, try something new. Do nothing. Well, what am I saying? Do nothing. Don't run, but sit with your fear for a few minutes. Think about it. What is the root cause? How did this thing get into my heart? What's the story you tell yourself about why you can't overcome that fear? You rehearse that story. Because my parents weren't there, because this happened. A moment of reflection can have a great effect to overcome fear in a way that's productive, deliberate, and effective in your heart. And as I said before, write it down. When you write down your fears on paper and actually question them, it forces you to analyze why you're afraid. Questions are designed to trigger your fears and bring them to the surface. The next thing is to recognize the excuses. And friends, we all make excuses. Fear makes us put things off. I'm tired. I have other stuff to do. It's a dumb idea anyway. You've probably said this out loud to yourself over and over at different times. Think about it. Is there any truth to those statements, or you are constructing an excuse to avoid a potential failure? What if it doesn't work out? They won't like me anyway. It's much easier and less painful to make excuses, but excuses and opting out will ultimately leave you feeling incredibly unfulfilled, Recognize when you're using an excuse and figure out how to overcome it. Too tired? Adjust your schedule so you can get a better night's sleep. Next time an excuse comes to you, make a decision to not give in to the little voice saying no, because it won't help you grow. As you guys are all young in this room, the way to grow to become an effective person as an adult is to overcome those things that are in our way. And I want to encourage you. Each of you have such a destiny on your life, such a calling, such hope, before you. And another thing is find valuable insight in pain. Lawrence shared with us before about how he came back to Australia in a really awful state, and how out of that state he developed a working with men that had gone through depression and gone through things, and that came out of his pain. And, pain can be a very effective teacher. Glenn, I've known Glenn for many years, and I can say to you that Glenn has marshaled his pain. And that pain has become the very tool where Glenn speaks out of today. The reason he has a voice is because he's allowed that pain to make him a man that has a message. And, guys, don't see pain as bad always. See it as a vehicle to step into something good. None of us likes it. Most of us go to great lengths to avoid it. But pain is an incredibly important teacher. If you accept that your life and your efforts to achieve your goals will be painful at times, painful experiences become an incredibly great opportunity to grow. When you get let go of pain as a threat to your survival, it loses its power and becomes another tool to overcoming fear. Everyone experiences hardships in life. Instead of letting pain and fear dictate your decisions, actively choose to learn from those painful moments to be in control of your life. Finally, I just want to share about this. Is really important. Except to win, sometimes you've got to fail first. What's the number one fear people have when it comes to accomplishing their goals? It's that they'll fail. But like pain, failure can actually teach us. In fact, failure is often a better teacher than success. If you accept from the onset that failure, actually making a mistake or tripping up, is actually part of a success, then it's an inevitable, you'll be less afraid of it. It'll be something that you can overcome. You know, failure can provide you with a valuable learning experience that will positively impact your future and the things that you want to do with your life. You know, friends, everyone fails. Successful business owners, world leaders, in fact, people that have gone on to do great things in life have actually failed the most. Have you ever heard of a man called Harlan Sanders? He actually started an organization called Kentucky Fried Chicken. You ever heard of that? He was born on a farm in 1819. He was the oldest of 3 children. His father died when he was 5. His younger brother was 3 and his mother was 7 months pregnant. After his father's death, Harlan, who was 5, was in charge of the household, while his mother worked full-time in a factory. His mother remarried when he was 12 to an abusive man. To avoid the beatings, Harlan dropped out of school, went to live with his uncle. At the age of 15, he lied about his age to enter the army. When he was a mule handler in Cuba, he was honorably discharged after just 4 months. After returning from Cuba, he bounced around from job to job. Finally, at the age of 28, he married his first wife, Josephine. While Harlan was on a business trip, Josephine sold all his belongings, took the children to live with her mother. Josephine's brother sent Harlan a letter saying she had no business marrying a no good fellow like you who can't even hold down a job. Finally, in 1930, at the age of 40, Harlan opened a service station in Kentucky in America, where he cooked chicken and other southern dishes. He didn't have any seating in the service station, so people would eat outstanding at the front of his service station. His cooking became so popular he eventually moved to a motel and opened a 142-seat restaurant. He spent the next 9 years perfecting the use of a pressure cooker to cook and make his chicken taste the way it did. He'd been pan-frying it for years, and eventually he developed a blend of spices that we know today as the original recipe. In 1949, the governor in Kentucky dubbed Harlan Sanders as Colonel Sanders. He also started developing his distinctly look with a bit of a goatee beard and began wearing a white suit. At the age of 65, his booming restaurant took a massive hit, and they built a huge restaurant, and he sold the restaurant at an auction. At 65, after 25 years in the restaurant business, Colonel Sanders was effectively broke. Shortly after, he received his first Social Security check for $100. He lived in his car for 2 years, was rejected over 1,000 times before finally finding a restaurant owner who agreed to use his recipe. This guy, 65, living in his car, he took over 1,000 no's before he ever got a yes. That's 14 no's per day, every day for 2 years. His offer was to license the recipe and receive 5 cents per chicken in return. From this, he grew his empire. We know it today as KFC, of course, and it's all over the world. In every country, it doesn't matter where you travel, KFC is there. But it all started in this failed businessman, but he went through many, 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 many fails to get to where he was. He eventually sold his business for multiple millions of dollars. I want to challenge you as I finish today to work as hard at making your dreams come true as he did. You know, whatever it is you want to do. This guy had this dream to cook, to make chicken taste good, you know. And within this room today, you might have a dream deep down inside your heart. It may be to write. It might be to paint. It may be to be a mum or a dad. It might be to one day to start a business. And maybe you've been too scared to say it to anybody because you didn't feel confident. But can I say to you today, if that dream's in your heart, can I encourage you to chase it? Don't let your fears stop you. Finally, just change your relationship with fear. Instead of letting it knock you down, use it as a motivation to grow and to achieve more. Once you recognize fear is not really real, the obstacles that appear to stand in your way suddenly become removed, and you'll feel empowered to take action. Your potential in life is limited only by one factor. You are ready to transform fear into action. I hope that's been encouragement today, guys. I know I've put a lot of information in such a short time, but I feel like if you want to overcome fear in your life, there's a way to do that. And it's, first of all, as I said before, facing and being ready to walk in through that fear and coming out the other side.